Welcome everybody, it's Lewpac here with another Albion Online video, and for today's topic I want to talk about something a little bit different. I want to talk about the social aspect of Albion and how I think it could be improved, and part of this is actually some changes that I would love to see in the cities and the city mechanics in Albion, because I feel like this is a really both underrated and very important aspect of the game that could definitely use some improvement in terms of, you know, players having fun, player retention, and keeping people with stuff to do online. Now, this isn't a new thing in MMOs. This isn't just specific to Albion. This goes way back into all games. I mean, I remember, say, for example, World of Warcraft. Everybody who played World of Warcraft will remember that there was a time where, you know, you were waiting for your raid to start, or you're waiting for your friends to get online for your dungeons or whatever, and you would just be there, you would have your character, and you would literally just be jumping around Orgrimmar Bank, or jumping around Stormwind, if that's your home plot, and just killing time, because the only other thing you could really do in town was go to the auction house, buy and sell, arrange your chest. There was very limited social activities available. I think this is a common problem for newer MMOs or the newer generation of games, because it's like since the introduction of the auction house, everything has been simplified. I think back to when I used to play Ultima Online back in the day, and it was such a richer experience because everything wasn't handed to you on a plate. There wasn't just this central place where everybody stood and did their buying and selling anonymously through an in-game system. You know, I would go to a dungeon in Ultima and I would get myself a nice bit of loot, something quite rare, a silver sword of vanquishing or something, and I'd go and I'd have to go and sell it in town. And then what I would do is I would find a buyer just by wandering around telling people I was selling it or posting on a forum or something. The buyer would give me a big chunk of silver for an expensive item, and suddenly I've got a bit of cash in my pocket. And then instead of going out and killing mobs, doing dungeons and stuff, often I would just spend an hour in town wandering around to people's shops, seeing what they had for sale, hanging around at the bank and just seeing who was offering what items, and just spending my money on anything that people had to sell. But there was a lot more interaction. You know, I had to seek out the stuff I wanted, and while of course it wasn't as convenient as a auction house system, it was actually a lot more engaging. And when you found a rare item in somebody's shop, and this is the same for Star Wars Galaxies as well, another great game that had that kind of social thing. You knew who the best vendors were. You knew who the best crafters were, who always kept their shops stocked with the tip-top items, you know, the best quality gear. So I knew that, you know, even if I had to walk 10 minutes to get to so-and-so's shop, I knew that they'd have the best stuff for sale. And I kind of miss that interaction in Albion because it's a player-driven market. I honestly feel like it could benefit from systems like that. Obviously, the auction house convenience is there, but I feel that there's a way for both systems to exist in game. So a few things I would love to see changed in Albion Online. Currently, if we look at, for example, Carlion, we look at the map of Carlion, you can see that it's just shops, or not shops rather, it's just crafting stations. All that's in Carlion is crafting stations. Now, why we need 17 cooks when they all do exactly the same thing? Why do we need 17 cooks in Carlion? Now, back on launch, there were so many players, and the durability and crafting capacity of the shops was drained, as well as their food was being drained in minutes. Like, any shop that had capacity was being used until it broke down. I think there was actually a bug with crafting capacity, or it wasn't working quite how it intended. But Carlion ground to a halt, so it needed this many shops. But nowadays, a lot of the big guilds obviously have their outland city plots with their crafting stations. It just feels we've got too much of the same stuff in Carlion. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but actually, if you buy a plot in Carlion, you could, in theory, put a house there if you wanted to. It would be very expensive. As you can see here, some of the plots going for 71 million, 63 million. you know, it would be very expensive because you would then have to bid to keep that plot as well. But in theory, you could set up a house and you could have it nicely decorated and you could store stuff there. We have the personal island system, but a lot of fun in MMOs is having your house and other people can see it as they wander around. So the first thing I would like to change is perhaps have a sort of residential district of each city, so that people that want their island and their farms and stuff like that can still do that. But actually I think it would be pretty cool having a residential district where only houses are permitted to be built and the prices are a lot more reasonable. Maybe you don't have to bid on them. Maybe there'd be a deed system similar to Darkfall, and then you could sell on your house if you didn't want it anymore, stuff like that. And if you fail to pay the upkeep on your house, for example, you go inactive, you know, your house goes up for sale or you know, bidding or whatever system. But there's definitely room for player housing because the islands kind of fill the player housing market, but true player housing, in my opinion, is in the instantly accessible world that everybody visits rather than instanced on your own player islands. It's quite a clever solution to the problem, but I don't feel that it's the best right now. Next thing I would love to see is actually player-owned shops. So rather than just crafting stations, you would have the ability to place a house or perhaps a different design for a shop. And then you would actually have your own vendors inside the shop, similar to Star Wars Galaxies or Ultima Online. And you would stock your vendors with items and set the prices, and then people could visit your shop and buy them. Now, similarly, you would also be able to set up buy orders on your vendors, so people could sell to your vendors certain items, perhaps materials that you need, or even new stock for you to list. So managing your shop would be a constant thing. You'd have to make sure you've always got stock, and you'd have to sort of buy items in at a reasonable price so you can keep your production going. That would be really cool, and it would add a little more of a satisfying feeling of being a merchant slash crafter, knowing that you run a good shop and people come from far and wide to buy your merchandise. The issue is there would have to be something with the auction house that makes your shop worth it. Maybe there's more fees on the auction house, which drives prices up, whereas a player-owned shop doesn't have fees. Or maybe the auction house could cap at a certain value, so shops would be used for high-value items. You know, the auction house could be used for day-to-day stuff, and then the shops would be used for the super rare and the super exotic items that people generally only buy one of rather than buy in huge quantities. Another option would be the auction house actually becomes a search feature. Rather than you buy from the auction house, when you search the auction house, it tells you what shops have what available and where they're located. So you could then go there. And admittedly, this would kill some of the convenience of gameplay. You know, just being able to buy 100 poisons at once. But at the same time, it would create a more immersive experience. And actually, because people would be going to shops rather than just sitting at the auction house, they would generally stock up on 5 or 6 sets of gear at a time to save going back every time they die. Whereas now, sometimes people would just die. They would just go to the auction house and re-gear just like that. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and sort of the last thing I'll probably say on this matter, is the next stage in creating a social aspect of the game and keeping the people who are just chilling in town, keeping those people interested and entertained, would be the introduction of social buildings. A couple ideas. I've got a few ideas on this. So obviously we would have residential districts of player housing, the ability to have shops as well that are actually worth having. On top of that, we could have social buildings. So you could have a tavern where obviously it would act as both a food, drink and potion shop. But also, you know, we could have social skills like dancing and music that we had similar to Star Wars Galaxies, where if you watch a dancer or a musician for a little while, you gain a small PvE buff or a small PvP buff for the next couple of hours, which makes it worth doing before you go on a PvE session or PvP session. And then the people that you're watching gain music or dancing XP, and then they progress their skills by having people watch them. And, you know, and it's just another little life skill. It's just another little layer of depth to the game, another thing to do. And often people go around in the taverns and just chill. A building that would be really cool to see would be a casino. So you could have a player-run casino. But for these buildings, I would say that you would have to own 4 adjacent large-size plots like these. And those could then, if you had 4 plots together, you could turn them into one of the bigger buildings, like a tavern or a casino. The casino, unsurprisingly, would be mainly focused around gambling and social, so you could have various gambling games, roulette, whatever. People love to gamble their in-game currency. It gives you a little buzz, gives you those endorphins like real-life gambling, but you're only, you know, losing a bit of silver. The staking on RuneScape, anybody who's ever played RuneScape will know all about staking, and what a like, even though it's just a silly little thing, some people absolutely love it. And I think just having these things where you could spend a little time where there's nothing else going on, it keeps people in game and it keeps people having fun, which is what it's all about. Just maybe watch out for like getting kids addicted to gambling and stuff like that. You don't want to go down the loot boxes path, but I think an in-game casino could be quite a laugh, and I think players would absolutely love it. And of course, being a casino owner could be quite profitable for the rich merchants in the game. So it's kind of would add another dynamic to the plots. You know, do you run a profitable casino, or do you set up 4 shops or 4 crafting stations? You've got more depth to the property ownership game. The last thing I'd like to see as well, the one idea, this one was actually, I think it came from a viewer of the live stream, would be a fighting pit or an arena, like for 1v1, like proper 1v1 dueling, where you sign yourself up, you put how much your match is for, and then opponents have the option to fight you. And then, you know, you and the opponent would fight in a little pit, and people could just gather around and watch, and they could also bet on the matches and stuff like that. Just little things like that. And I think, even though it doesn't seem like revolutionary gameplay ideas, I think the introduction of more social buildings and more things to do in town would actually help people fill the downtime while you're waiting for your groups to form, or you're waiting for the next war camp, or waiting for your GVGs. You would have a lot more options to just hang out and spend the time doing silly little fun activities. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, guys, in the comment section about the social aspect of Albion, and what other games you've played and that had really good social aspects. I mean, to me, Ultima Online and SWG, Star Wars Galaxies, were the ones in terms of player-run worlds and economics and just social activities. Obviously, Star Wars Galaxies, you could have your own entire town and fill it with, you know, if you could attract the best merchants to your town, then more people would visit your town. And then they might want to like pay to set up a house there, so you'd be getting some taxes off them. And then they might open a little business of their own, or start using your mission boards and generating more income for your town. And the bigger, more well-known your town got, the more it prospered. But then eventually it might get so overpopulated that people had to run miles for mob spawns because your town had got so big. And then they didn't like your town anymore. So it was such a cool system. And while this isn't Star Wars Galaxies and we have these cities already, I'd definitely like to see more of those sort of influences brought into Albion, because I think the framework is there, and I think if we can add stuff like that to the game, it will just enrich everybody's experience. So for sure, let me know in the comments what you loved in older games, what you think could be done in Albion for the social side and the town side, like shopkeeping and stuff like that. And also interested on how you would address the problem of obviously the auction house just being better than shops because it's all in one place. Is there a way to transition from that to a shop-based system without annoying people, upsetting players? Who knows? But yeah, let me know. Anyway, thank you for watching the video, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can always leave a comment below, as I said. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you soon.